To our meeting, we have a special guest with us tonight. Most of us here in this room know him. His name is Leon Tarter. And you know, there's an old saying out there that you can take the boy out of the county, but you can't take the county out of the boy. And I think that's true with Leon. I think he's always had a soft spot in your heart for Emerson County. And we're glad that you're here with us tonight. And we want to listen to some of your stories about you growing up and your family, how you started your business, and then we'll maybe ask you a few questions along, but we just want you to feel free tonight, okay? And talking about being free, when we ask you to come, Johnny, what am I doing wrong?
Well, you're no matter to your mouth. There you go.
Well, okay. I guess that helps, Johnny.
Put it farther away. Hold it, yeah, it's not me, it's hold it out there.
Well, that's what I was doing, and it was squealing. Okay. All right.
He's not as loud as you are now.
When we were getting ready for this meeting tonight, and I got to thinking about my life with you, and I've got to come clean. I had an ought against you. And yeah, I did. And I want to get it out in the open tonight. When I was just a young boy, I was probably about 5 years old, Dad and you sold out a herd of dairy cows for us. I don't know if you remember it or not. But anyway, I had a pet cow named Patty, and I'd raised her on a bottle. I could go out in the field and I could rub on her, I could crawl over her, I could brush her hair. I mean, she was just real gentle. And the day of the sale, knowing you said, Ham, put that boy on that cow and ride him in, and said that'll make him bring more money. And I can just tell you now, boys, we got a gentle herd here. Look at this kid riding this cow. But see, you made me mad because you sold him a cow. And that's been about, I guess I was about 5 years old. And I sort of forgot about it, to tell you the truth. And a couple of years ago, I was over at the nursing home, and there was a guy there by the name of Johnny Alexander. Y'all know Johnny. Yeah. And I was talking to him, and he said, you know what I remember about you? And I said, no. He said, that sale that y'all had out there, Leon, and you rode that cow. That brought back memories. It wasn't good memories. And so that brought that old bad feeling back. But today, I was reading my Sunday school lesson because I've got to teach Sunday. And in there it said, if you have an ought against your brother, you need to make it right so you'll have pure charity in your heart. So tonight I'm going to make it right with you. I do love you, but you're going to have to buy me breakfast for selling my cow. I want a country ham breakfast from you. Will you do that?
Yeah.
Okay, I figured you would. So when we leave here tonight, we're going to be friends.
That's right.
All right. We've all heard you sell. And there's an old chant, 35 now, 40, 45 now, 50, who'll get 55 now, 60, sold Tarter. Have you seen that on around Christmas time? I'm glad you're here tonight.
Thank you.
And I want you to just pick up and tell us a little bit about your life, your parents, and your business, and we'll go from there, okay?
Okay.
1, 2, 3, 4. All right. I think I remember that sale, and Jeff, I believe I remember you and that cow favors a whole lot. The only thing is, you're a little bigger than the cow was. Anyhow, I'm honored to be here, and I know practically everybody here, and some I don't, but anyhow, I've had a wonderful life. I was born and raised in Emerson County. And I'm going to give you a little auction shed here. That's been my life. Well, all right, sir. What am I going to give for him? I got 30, I'll be 5 for the 40, 35 for the 40, 40,
yeah.
45, 45 for the 50, 50, 50 on the 5, 55. So, Tarter really come in.
I believe I was just as good as you were.
You are, you're better. Anyhow, I'll tell you a few things that's happened over the years, and it's been interesting to me. And I was raised up in the Methodist church up here in Cedar Springs. My daddy had one white shirt and one necktie, and he wore it every Sunday. My mother had a hat and a pair of high heel shoes, and she wore them every Sunday. But my daddy was, the motto was, work 6 days a week and go to church on Sunday, and you would keep your kids out of a lot of trouble. And that's when the kids come to our house on Saturday afternoon to play, my daddy would send them home, and they'd say, my kids have got to work on Saturday afternoon. So that's kind of been my motto over the years. We worked 6 days a week, and we take our families and go to church on Sunday, and it's been wonderful. And I've had a good life, and I'm 93 years old. I've outlived all of my family, and I was in World War II, and I was in Normandy invasion. There's 160 of us went over the side of that boat and landed at Utah Beach, and I'm the only one living out of 160. There was a boy in Pennsylvania died last year, and he was, they left me, his son called me and said, well, Dad just passed away, and you're the only one now, Chick. That's what they called me when I was in the Army. They called me Chick.
How did that name come about?
Well, when you run behind a tank, they say, well, I don't know what, I'd say, well, run like a chicken. And so they named me Chick. So anyhow, that's all they do. But anyhow, go back to, I went to Capitol Hill School, and it was a wonderful school and had some wonderful teachers there. I remember one so much was Edna Ray, and she was just sweet as she could be, and she's got a daughter that's the same way, married a Johnson girl, Johnson boy. Anyhow, so we went to the Methodist church in Cedar Springs, and they sent us a preacher that was probably a little bit ahead of the crowd, and he wanted to get a piano in the church. Well, it almost broke the church up. Some people, they didn't want music in the church, and the choir kind of wanted, and so finally the preacher won, and they got a piano in the church. And his daughter played it, and finally they got used to it, and now I guess everybody, we got piano in our church. Sarah Gray back there is a pianist, and we go to church together, and I've been going to the same church for 65 years. And that's where I've carried my family, and believe it or not, Johnny was a kid. He went 9 years without missing a Sunday. And and I was with him. And so I believe in going to church, and I'm proud of my church at Smiths Grove. If I got out-of-town people, I always go by there and say, this is where I go to church. This lady here goes to church there. But anyhow, so the piano caused a lot of problems in the church. That was about time that they were taking Mammoth Cave. They was going in there around buying those people's land for $10, $11 an acre. The government was to make the Mammoth Cave, and they had to go somewhere. And so we had a family that come over to Cedar Springs who were going to try to buy a place there, and he wanted to talk about the school and the church. So he stopped at a neighbor's house and said, I'm so-and-so, I'm from over at Mammoth Cave, and they're taking my farm, and this is my wife and 3 little kids. And we're going to talk about the school and the church, and said, you've got 2 churches here. You got a Methodist on one side of the road and a Baptist on the other. Well, this little neighbor boy was visiting there, and he spoke up and said, hey, mister, you don't want to go to that Methodist church. My mama said they was all going to hell on a piano. Well, anyhow, but things now got better, and so I went to school at Capitol Hill, and I went to a wedding over in North Carolina, and a niece was marrying a lawyer over there, and they had 4 or 5 brothers, and they was all lawyers. So they had a big wedding, I went to the reception, and I sat next to a lady, she was assistant something of the Mars College. And she had a big hat on, really dressed nice, and I sat next to her to eat, and some of the relatives on down here. And I was about to get finished eating, and she says, "Oh, I hear you're from Kentucky." And I said, "Yeah." She said, "I guess you went to UK." I said, "No, I went to Capitol Hill." Well, she was from Mars Hill. I thought, well, Capitol Hill sounds pretty good. Well, she never said nothing else, and my family over here, when they heard me say that, they blew the coffee all over the table. But anyhow, I was pretty proud of Capitol Hill. So the only thing that bothers me about the school situation, the government has got in the school situation, and as far as I'm concerned, it's getting in bad shape. Now, you may not agree, and I don't, if you want to, if you don't, all right. But the way I see it, the school situation is getting in bad shape, and when you take Christianity out of schools, you go back in Bible history as far as you want to go, and you'll see that any country or any squad that rejected Christ had a bad ending. And we're headed in that direction. I went to Army reunion in Florida about 4 years ago, and so there were some people there. There was 4 people. They were educated people, principals and so on. They wanted to talk to me because I had been to a one-room school. And I said, when you go to a one-room school, if you would listen, you can almost pass your grades for listening to the next teacher. And so anyhow, they wanted to meet with me, and I said, all right. And we went in this room and closed the door. And so they said, well, now, what happened in a one-room school? I said, well, everybody walked to school, and when we got there, we'd hold hands and say Bible verses, and the teacher say a little prayer, and then we got on about our student. So this woman just laughed out loud. And I said, now, what's funny about that? She said, wouldn't we look silly, 500 kids are holding hands and saying Bible verses? I said, well, I can't think of it, but one thing would be more silly, and that's if you didn't do it. So I thought, oh, gal, I'll just pour it on you. And I did. So she said, I guess you think that the pattern's what we... I said, if you don't have discipline, you don't have nothing in no organization if you don't have discipline. And you can't have discipline if you don't have some kind of a punishment. And so we went on talking, and she said, well, the psychiatrist says that that's not true. So we went on and talked a little while, and she said, again, the psychiatrist said, and I said, now look, lady, I'm trying to respect you, and I want you to respect me. Don't you bring that name up again. I don't want to hear it. So anyhow, but I know that they are very, very intelligent people, but and that will probably fit for some, but it really bothers me that they're taking Christianity out of schools, and teachers has no authority to do anything. I met this big man from up in Pennsylvania here a while back. He's a big fellow. I said, what's a big man like you do in Pennsylvania? He said, I'm a policeman in the schools. I said, yeah, what do you do? He said, well, you're going to laugh at this, but I try to keep the students from whipping the teachers. And he said, that may sound funny to you, but that's the honest truth. He said, we have gangs up there, and said, if they decide they want to whip the teacher, they'll mind your whip one. And says, there's really not a whole lot I can do. Said, I'm a policeman, but they don't give me no authorities. I can't hit one, and I can't slap one, and I can't put him in jail. I just can threaten him. That's all I can do. So anyhow, we got what we got, but I don't know what the end result is going to be. But I heard this lady say the other day, she's a teacher, and she taught kids around 13, 14 years old. And of course, I know when I was 14 years old, I thought I knew everything. And so there was 3 of them standing up there, and she had asked them the second time to sit down. And one of them says, we don't have to sit down, and you can't make us sit down, and I can slap you, but you can't slap me. And I said, well, what'd you do in that case? I just turned to the blackboard, and I started, and I act like I didn't hear him. Well, there wasn't nothing I could do. So anyhow, that's our situation, and we're all kind of just sitting on our butt and let it all happen. So I don't know what we could do about it, but I know I spent some time in the war, and I've never seen the government take over anything that they didn't screw it up some way or another. And that may not be nice to say, but anyhow. So anyhow, I went to the one-room school, and I thought it was wonderful. And the 6th grade, then they bused us to Rocky Hill. And the Rocky Hill people, when we got off of the bus, the kids there would be outside, and they called us the Nobby Knights. So we'd have a pretty good little fight, and we'd go in and spend the day teaching and learning what we were supposed to do. But anyhow, then I went to Brownsville to high school, and I went a couple of years, and my mother and Daddy didn't have much of an education, so they didn't care. They didn't push us to go to school, and so we didn't go. We stopped and went to work, and I worked in a rock quarry for about a year, and then I went to Evansville, and I worked in the defense plant, and I got drafted. His aunt was on the draft board here at Brownsville, and that's where I went to, and I was drafted when I was 18. And I went to Fort Riley, Kansas. That's the wind blew there all the time, and it was terrible weather, I thought. But they had a lot of coyotes out there. So if you stood guard, I never had heard at that time coyotes, but there's a lot of them there. So they put me on guard right off, and there was 3 or 4 of us on guard at the motor pool, and we was walking. It was about 12 o'clock, and it was a motor pool, and so I was telling this boy when we'd come to meet at the corner, I'd say, I can drive that big truck. I know how to drive it. And he said, you really? I said, well, yeah. So I went over and had the key in it, and I started it up, and I backed it up and pulled it up 2 or 3 times. He said, oh, you all right? And about that time, there's an officer showed up, now here at midnight. Now, where he come from, I don't know. And he says, what are you doing, soldier? I said, I just showing him I could drive this truck. He said, where's your gun? I said, it's laying over there. He said, well, that was really against the rules. So I done never saw. He said, oh, you wanting to be a truck driver? I said, yeah, I think I would. And he said, well, now, if you get a good job like that, you know you got to start from the bottom. And I said, well, I understand that. And he said, well, I'll see what I can do. So he took my name. And in a few days, he called me over the loudspeaker and said, come to the order room, Private Tarter, and I did. And he said, you know, I told you if you wanted a better job, you had to start at the bottom. So he put me cleaning out the grease pit. And the grease was about a foot deep, and I had to get down in there with a hose and brush and stuff and clean the grease pit. So I was in there about 3 or 4 hours. And it was about supper time when I got out, and he come and inspected, and he said, that'll be all right. And so I went to salute him, and I said, now, I don't know exactly how to salute. I've just been out there in a few days, and I said, wish you'd tell me. So he showed me how to salute, and saluted me 2 or 3 times. Well, the boys that was in the chow line saw him saluting me. What in the world's going on here? You see that officer saluting that boy? Well, when we got in the barracks that night after eating and quiet, and one of them says, what's going on there, little one? Said, we saw this lieutenant saluting you. I said, you better watch my smoke, boy. I might be an undercover man. So they treated me like a king for a few days. They found out better. So I wasn't very popular after that. Anyhow, I went on to basic training and then went to Fort Meade, Maryland, and then wound up in Camp Shanks, New York. And I run into James Cole and Spencer Webb at Camp Junction, New York. And James Cole got killed and Spencer got captured. And quick as the war was over, they sent them boys out of prison camp home quick as they could. And I got a little clipping from my mother, the gimlet out of the paper, that Spencer Webb got home. And I was glad to see that. I always liked Spencer. He was kind of a little short, tough guy, but he was nice, real nice. But anyhow, we landed at Utah Beach. And there was a lawyer over there the other day. His daddy had been there, and he just filled his pocket full of that sand. And he brought it home, and he made a little bottle of sand for me, and a picture of the beach, and a little rock, and he brought it and gave it to me in a little box. I thought that was wonderful.
Yeah.
And I couldn't hardly keep from crying, but I saw so many boys that got hurt there, and brought back a lot of memories, but I appreciate him doing that. And so I've known this fellow a long time. Of course, I knew his daddy real well. I know enough of him to hang him probably, but I ain't gonna
Mutual. That's mutual. I know enough about you too.
And you know, I had Miss Sanders there. I had a sale one time for J.P. Alexander, her father, and he was a wonderful fellow, and he run the store there at Cleveland. And my relations with him was really, really good. I started out after the war, and my mother always called me the baby. I was the baby of the family, and me and my brother got to grinding some lime and rop, and we'd have people come there that wanted to lime. By the way, Dick Webb here in Brownsville, on the big farm over here, and he was one of our customers, first ones, and he come to us and says, I heard you boys just got out of the war and you was doing grinding lime, and I want to give you an order. And he gave us a big order, and Dick Webb, and I never will forget that.
How many brothers and sisters did you have?
I got two brothers. I had two brothers and two sisters. They're all gone.
What was your dad and mom's name?
My dad was named Sammy Tarter, Sam Tarter, and they called him Sammy, and my mother was Murdy Tarter.
Okay.
Mommy.
And,
Mommy.
Mommy, yeah. And they,
What was her maiden name?
Keith, K-E-I-T-H, Keith.
Keith.
And my mother was a little short lady, and I don't see how there could be a better mother in the world.
Yeah.
And when I was overseas, she prayed for me night and day. We had a thing come up while I was over there after we got into Normandy, a little place. There was a little town there named Hagley Prairie, about 15 miles in. And they was waiting for us there, and we lost 1,000 boys one day out of our outfit. And that was a terrible loss.
Yeah.
And there's a monument there made out of blue marble, said, thanks 79th Division for liberating our town. There wasn't a house standing, and we had a hard time there. And we crossed the Rhine River up in Holland. I went to church to a fellow. He had got 8 children, and he lives in Simpson County, and he had 2 little girls that was being baptized, and he wanted me to come to the church that day down in Tennessee, and I did. And the preacher said something about a World War II man there, and quick as the service was over, here come this man rushing over to me and him and his wife, and he said, would you happen to have been in Holland while you was over there fighting the Germans? I said, yeah, we made a Rhine River crossing in Holland. When you crossed the Rhine River out of Holland, you was in Germany. So we crossed the Rhine River there. I was on the first boat. There was 4 boats, 25 to the boat. I was the first boat. After that, they bombed the other side every 20 minutes for 24 hours. A 5-mile radius, and everything's supposed to be dead, and it was. So we crossed the river at 4 o'clock in the morning with a little bitty John on a John boat, and had a little motor behind it with a exhaust run down in the water where it didn't make no racket. But we got across the river, and there wasn't nothing but holes over there. And so this man that I met down there says, I was there. I was in a bomb shelter. I was 7 years old. And said, we was just scared to death. And I said, I was 19 years old, and I was scared to death. So anyhow, so they built this pontoon bridge across the Rhine River, made it in a rainbow where the water be pushing on it. And about 1 or 2 o'clock that afternoon, they had the bridge finished, and here comes Patton's tanks. And they was rolling fast as they could across the bridge. And they got on about a half a mile from the bridge, and there's a big old Tiger tank that these bombs hadn't got. They shot one of these tanks in the side and knocked it off of the road. And there was a boy there, a Smith boy from Glasgow, was in that tank. I didn't know that till 4 or 5 years ago. And he was in that tank, and it broke his back and both legs. So they put him in the hospital there in Holland, and then they transferred him over to England. And the war was over, and he was still in England. And the neighbors made up money and sent her a plane ticket to England to visit her son. Yeah. And she did, and she came home in about 5 days, but he didn't come home. He passed away after that. So the Holland people was really good to us. But they had been liberated by the English. So when we was going to Holland to make the Rhine River crossing, we had no idea where we was going. Every number on our vehicles and everything was painted over where nobody would know what we was doing or where we was going. And we was about 2 days and nights of going up there. And we got there about 11 o'clock one night where we was supposed to be. And the next morning there was pamphlets scattered all over everything. The Germans had dropped them that night and said, welcome 79th Division to the Rhine crossing. And we didn't even know what was up there for, but they did. So they kept up with us pretty darn good. So anyhow, in about 2 or 3 weeks we made the Rhine crossing, and of course when we got in Germany they stayed in, we got pushed back, and that was just. Now I'm going to tell you about something else you want to ask me.
I want to ask you, you was talking about people that you'd run into in the war and everything. Was there someone in your division that was a good baseball player, that was a pitcher?
When I was in basic training, yeah. I can't think of his name. Pete something, wasn't it?
You're close. I can't think of it either.
He played, and then
he was right in his prime when they took him. He supposedly struck out Mickey Mantle, a bunch of Ted Cobb,
and then there was two of them. There was also a pitcher that pitched in 1942 in the World Series, Cincinnati, I believe it was. I forget his name, but he was quite. Now those guys, I don't think ever went overseas. They took some training, but then they didn't stay with us. They was more important than we was.
Yeah.
But now we had some heavy training there.
You remind me of Glenn Cassidy one time, that story.
Yeah.
Glenn was in the service, and Warner Stice and a bunch of those guys, you know who they were, and Ed Roundtree, I think, was in there, and they needed a baseball player, and Ed Roundtree was on KP, and so they needed Ed to play, and so they had to have somebody to fill in for him, so they got Glenn Cassidy. That didn't go over too good, because you know how Glenn was. He said, who ever heard of winning a war playing baseball? But he used some choice words in there, you know.
Oh yeah.
But yeah, you sort of like Glenn Cassidy.
Well, Glenn come to a sale one day, and he was late. We done started, so he drove through and disturbed everybody. And I said, well, here's Glenn Cassidy. He's a millionaire driving a $50 truck. But he was a good fellow, ain't no doubt about that. I was going to tell you about one battle I was in over there. If you got something else you want to
No,
ask
you
me.
go ahead, I got something later.
All right, we had a lieutenant that was just wonderful, and he got shot the second time, and the second time he didn't come back to us. He got shot in the head, and they sent us a feller. They sent us a lieutenant. He had been busted from a lieutenant to a private, and when he got to us, he was a private, but he had been a lieutenant, and he was smart, and he knew things. But he got the captain's jeep when he was in France, and carried out a couple of girls and had a wreck and killed one of them, so they busted him to a private. So they sent him to us, and I stood guard with him several times, and he told me that if he didn't get his bars back, his family would disown him, because they'd done everything to send him to school to be an officer. So anyhow, they come up, and there was 44 boys that was captured, and when the Germans would capture some of our people, they had a hard time getting the trucks up to get them, because we had so many planes that they attacked them on the road and stuff, and so sometimes they'd take them back a mile or two inside the behind the lines, and they'd put them in the house and keep them there 4 or 5 days till they could get trucks up and get them. And our job was, while they was waiting, is to go in there and get them out. And sometimes we got them out, and sometimes we didn't. I was a cavalry scout. And they would say, well, what's a cavalry scout? It's exactly like when you see a cowboy movie. The scouts went out and found the Indians and come back and told them where they was, and they'd go different routes and so on. So we went into towns behind enemy lines and tried to find out what was there. If there's tanks there, we called the Air Force. We didn't call our tanks because our tanks didn't have a chance with their tanks. Their tanks had 90mm guns on them, ours had 76. And our tanks couldn't, so we didn't even call them. But anyhow, so the headquarters had called our lieutenant and says, if you'll go in there and get those 44 boys out, we'll give you your bars back. We didn't know it, just the lieutenant knew it. Well, he wanted to make everything work right, so he got a man to go with us that could speak good German, and he was a medic. And he borrowed a light tank from the tank division there, and the medicine. We met behind the enemy lines about 3 or 4 miles, at least 3 miles that morning, that we was going to attack to get the boys out. So he issued us ammunition that would set things afire. You know, when you shoot, it shoot, and you could shoot a house 2 or 3 times, be burning all over. So we met at the edge of town, and he said, this is a special mission that we're going to have today, and we've never had one like it, and says, we're going to shoot everything that moves. I don't care what it is, it moves, I want it shot. And some kid says, you mean women and children? He shook that boy. He said, look, they sent us over here to kill these SBs, and that's what we're going to do. But we never had nothing like that. So we went into town. The tank was first. We took those tracer bullets and shot the houses. We burned every house that went up the street. Had them all afire. To where everybody would be so upset that we could get in and get them boys out. Well, it didn't work out. This is about 8:30 in the morning. We was there at 3 o'clock that afternoon, and they had counterattacked on us, and we had lost our machine gun jeeps. And when the tank rounded the corner, it was a 3-story building, and they shot some kind of a bazooka or something down in that tank and killed all 4 of them. Now we was in trouble. There's one little boy in the tank that crawled out the little front door and fell down the tank and crawled in behind it. One time in the daytime, we got a foot, and I crawled up to him, and I said, are you all right? And he was laying on his stomach. And he says, I don't have no feeling in my back. I raised his shirt up, and there was several little red spots in his back where this shrapnel had went through. And he said, am I going to die? And I said, no, it don't look that bad. And I always said that.
Yeah.
And of course, that didn't happen. He died pretty soon. But anyhow, the man that was the tank commander, about 3 or 4 months ago, there's a lady had called this feller in Florida with us and trying to find me. I'm the only one living who was in that battle. And she wanted to know about her granddaddy. And I told this man, I said, you tell her to go home and forget about it, that he was a good man and he died a good person, and all, because we went off and left him there. They might have been 4 or 5 days or a week or 2 weeks before anybody ever found him, and he was so tore up, part of him fell out of the tank and the other stayed in the tank, so he was just mush. But anyhow, so it got bad. So me and this little boy run around behind the house and went in a little barn there. This little barn kind of like we have, and it had a place where they pulled in the wagons, had a ladder going up to the loft, and they had hay in there. We run in there, and this boy said, I'm gonna go up this ladder up in this loft, see if I can see where all this shooting's coming from. And I said, well, I'll go with you. So we just threw our guns across the shoulder and began to go up the ladder. Well, he was in front of me, and quick as about time he got up to where the loft was, there was 2 German soldiers there, and they raised up and shot him and killed him just like that. He fell down on me. I never did see him. He fell down on me, and I fell down on the ground. Rifle over here, and I'm laying on my back looking straight up at them. And they both got their guns right in my face, pointed right at me. I was scared to death. I began to cry and scream. I was praying. I wanted them to know I was praying. I was saying, Lord, don't let them kill me. Please don't let them kill me. In a half a second or so, they began to talk to each other. I didn't know what they're saying. I was just screaming. I knew that was the last of Leon Tarter. And you know what? About that time, they laid their guns down and put their hands up and come down that ladder and give up to me. You know, somebody had to be holding my hand.
Yeah.
Well, the little old boy, he didn't look like he was over about 15 years old. I guess the one that shot him. And he looked down at him, and big tears come in his eyes. And I said to myself, that boy was raised right. He don't want to be here. He wasn't here to trying to kill somebody. He was just doing what the situation Hitlerism told him to do. But anyhow, I had several real close calls. And I said, if it hadn't been my mother back home praying for me, that I don't think I'd have been here. Now my division didn't land. We didn't land on D-Day now. I don't want to take something that, well, D-Day was on the 6th. Our division landed on the 9th and 10th. That's 3 days later. And they wasn't friendly then, but anyhow, it was better than the first day.
Yeah.
But had lots of things, and I told my lieutenant one day, I said, Lieutenant, you know, I've been over here a long time, longer than most of you. And it looked like every time you have a bad mission, you call on me. And you know, he looked at me and he says, I've got to have somebody that I can depend on. I want to go home too.
Yeah. Yeah.
I said, well, I'll never say another word, and I didn't. but we sure went on some roughings. And one night I froze my feet and froze my legs. And about 2 days later, I said, Lieutenant, he said, oh, you're gonna have to go back to the aid station. I went back to the aid station and he looked at him, and he was about 20 miles back, and he said, oh, I can't do nothing for you. You're gonna have to go back farther than this. And so they put me in an ambulance and another boy, and they carried us back about 50 miles to a hospital. So the next morning, we got there about 4 o'clock. And so they put us to bed, and the next morning I had a high fever. I know there was an officer there, and he kept putting cold towels on my head. So next morning they come in and said, son, you got so much poison in your feet that we're gonna have to take your left foot and leg off. And I want you to sign here, and since you're at yourself, we're supposed to let you sign. And I said, I'm not gonna sign it. He said, you want your life or you want your feet? And I said, I want them both. Well, he said, well, all right, we'll try it. I said, I won't do it. I want to stay here if I can't go home with my feet. So they started giving me penicillin. It was a wonder drug at that time. Penicillin and triple supple. And in 2 or 3 days, I could tell I was better. My feet and legs had popped open and had big places on them where they broke open. And they told me that, he said, well, if you live one day, it'll give you trouble. And of course, now it's been 70-some years, and now they say the nerves are dying in my feet. And I can't hardly walk. I do pretty good otherwise, but my feet just won't hold me. I have no strength in my toes whatsoever. And your toes have a lot to do with your walking and standing and whatever. But anyhow, I don't want to, I think I've talked long enough.
Well, I want
I've
to,
said too much.
no, that's very informative. And I want to thank you for what you did. How many years were you in the service?
3 years.
3 years, okay. So when you got out, you come back home. When did you actually start into the auction business?
Well, I went in the dry cleaning business over Smith's Grove for 10 years.
Was your partner Willis Sledge?
Excuse me?
Was your partner Willis Sledge?
Well, Willis furnished a bunch of cars. Oh, yeah. He was,
Yeah, I had talked to Willis about you one time.
He was a wonderful fellow.
Yeah.
He helped me a lot.
Some of y'all might know Willis Sledge. Y'all, any of you here remember Willis Sledge? He used to, well, he drove a milk truck route for years around Smith's Grove and everything, but
He was good.
yeah, he was a good guy, Willis was. He
Well,
told me some good stories about you
Yeah.
in the dry cleaning, in the car business.
Yeah, that's right.
Huh?
And, I rode the dry cleaners 11 years, but what I did, I still wanted to be in the auction business, and so while I was pressing clothes, I got me a little speaker, and I practiced 4 or 5 hours every day for 5 years. And people would go by down the street and they'd hear that racket in there, and they'd say, what's going on in there? And the neighbor said, oh, that guy's crazy. But I practiced and practiced and practiced, and then after about so many years, then I got some of the farmers to go with me to Glasgow. I knew that man been a long time, and to see if they'd hire me at the stockyard.
Yeah.
And so the farmers offered to bring cattle if he'd hire me, and he said, well, I get a chance to will. And so it wasn't long till he called me, and I started the stockyard up there, and I sold it on Saturday. I was there for 26 years. And it went from a sale of about 30 minutes up to about 10, 12 hours. And so I saw it was getting too much for me, and I turned it over to Johnny, and he was there about 30 years. So it wore us both out.
I know, but Johnny, I think I'm right. Didn't you win the Auctioneer of the Year award one time for selling cattle?
I was in the top 10 of the nation 5 times.
Okay.
Well, I meant to tell you, I was 1993 state champion. I won at Louisville. And then I come back in 2011 and win it again.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just am messing around when I went the second time. They had it in Bowling Green. I thought, well, since they're here, I'm gonna go in and I won it again. But anyhow, auction has been our life, and we've enjoyed it and had a good life, and tried to do the right thing. And but we don't work on Sunday, but we work 6 days a week. And I had a lady call me from up north, said, I want to see a house that you got, and it was on Sunday afternoon. And I said, well, I'm sorry, sweetheart, but we don't work on Sunday. She said, well, where I come from, Sunday is their main day. I said, well, when do they go to church? Well, now, I don't know about that.
Yeah.
So I said, well, some things is important to some and some is not.
Yeah.
You know, when I come back out of the war and trying to get something going and in the dry cleaning business, it looked like that the whiskey's business was going to be the mine. I had some buddies and the beer and whiskey business looked like I was making a lot of money. I said something to my mother about maybe and she cried and begged me not to never do it, and I promised her that I never would. And I haven't gone back on that. And I've had people, we got several commercial buildings that we rent, and there's always somebody wanting to rent one for a sports bar or something, and I said, I can't do it. And then I said, well, I promised my mother. When I say that, they don't, most times don't say no more.
Yeah.
And so you can make a living without it. And so we got a partner. We got a partner on a steak center down at Franklin on the interstate down there. Me and this daughter got a, and they was going to get liquor in there. So David, my son David, he does the renting and keeps it up and does that on that, and he's in charge of it. So this man says, David, we're trying to get liquor down here, and we need a little donation. And David says, oh, we don't, they can't come in the building where we own any part of it. And they said, well, David, this is the first time we ever disagreed on anything. Said, well, let me give you a little story here. Let's say we start selling whiskey and somebody come in and buy a bottle of whiskey and runs over your little granddaughter and kills him. Say, is that worth it? Oh, David, now. Well, it tickled me to death. I thought, boy, Mom is still with us.
Yeah.
I'm telling you.
Yeah.
So anyhow, that's kind of story. I'm not saying now I'm condemning anybody else to do anything they want to, but I've got a little problem with it.
Yeah. Right off the top of your head, do you know how many parcels or sales that you've had through your life?
No, we've been running anywhere from 60 to 85 a year for years, and that's about as big as you can get in that county. And we probably got 50% of the business or more. We didn't have a full page every week, and my boys work hard, and that's just part of the game you play.
Yeah.
But we just work 6 days, that's all.
And Eddie won't let us quit.
He won't let you quit. He said you wouldn't let him quit. That's why they had to work hard, him and David.
That's all right.
Yeah.
It keeps you out of Venus.
Does anybody have any questions they would like? Yeah, we got one over here.
I'd like to know if he's been to D.C. to the monuments there.
Have you been to D.C. to see any of the war monuments in D.C.?
No, I haven't. I've thought about it, but I haven't been.
You'd be a great candidate for the honor flights.
Very interesting.
The honor flights.
Yeah, he said you'd be a good candidate to go up there for that. Does anybody else have anything? Yeah, Doc.
It's not really important, but I can't help it. There's a fellow that I see every Sunday, he sits in church, looks like him. Boy,
He says there's a guy that he sees every Sunday sitting in church that looks like you.
I tell you what, I've always felt good about him, every time I see him. But this is very special tonight, how much it's meant to me, having been in the service like you did. But I'm gonna brag on you even more, and I thank the Lord for you.
Thank you.
I thank the Lord for you even more in this little county right here, in the Christians.
Thank you.
And I'm gonna say right there what you've mentioned several times. I think we've turned against God. I'm afraid our country's going downhill. If we don't get together, you predicted it right. It's happened all through history. Thank you, Leon Tarter.
Thank you.
Elizabeth, do you have anything?
I can't think of anything. I'm just proud of Leon and his service to our country.
I am too. Yeah.
Well, you know, I think I've got more good friends than anybody. When I go in a restaurant to eat, I'll say, put me back over here. I've got so many friends, and I just let them. They come by and talk to me and shake hands, well, I can't hardly eat, you know.
Yeah.
But I love every one of them, and I want them to do it. I don't want them to stop, because I really cherish my friends a whole lot. But everywhere I go, see, I'm up here and I'm having a sale, and everybody knows who I am. But we got all these numbers. Now I don't ever hear nobody's name. I just hear what their number is,
Yeah.
you know. So I don't hear too many names. I sold old cars in Louisville and Nashville at one time, and cattle, and been in the real estate business, and I've had lots of sales, and I sure appreciate all the business. I grew up here at Pig, and we walked to school down in Capitol Hill, and me and my family, and I've seen my sisters walk in the rain, and the ice and freeze on their hair before they got there, and we didn't think nothing about it, and then that was just part of life.
I'm a little interested in your family. Did your dad have any brothers?
No, my daddy was, he had sisters, but he didn't have no brother. My daddy was it was funny, he was the seventh child that did not see his father. And they claimed that he could cure the thrush.
Exactly.
Babies used to have the thrush.
Yeah.
And we'd be over in the field, and they'd bring babies over there for him to blow in their mouth.
Yeah.
And he'd blow in their mouth, and they'd get down and start playing.
Well, could he remove warts also?
No, I don't think so.
But that's right.
Yeah, the seventh
right.
son of the seventh son.
It got around, and he'd tell them, he'd say, now, I don't know whether this is working out, but this is what I said, and he'd blow in the kid's mouth, and it wouldn't be long, they'd be down playing, and they'd take them home, but it was a lot of it, a lot of people brought them.
Now, you talking about his sisters. How many sisters did he have?
Oh, he had 5 or 6 sisters, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, they're scattered all over. One of them went to California, and one of them went to Oklahoma. Back then, he had a sister who went to Oklahoma, and she passed away, a young woman. I had three kids. And the man couldn't handle them, and he put them on the train. He was an engineer on the train. He put those 3 kids on the train in Oklahoma and sent them to Rocky Hill. And my people met him over there and kept them for a year, and then sent them back to him when he got married.
Well, good. Okay.
Leon, tell them about how Mr. Tarter went out west when he's young started.
Who did?
Mr. Tarter.
My dad, he wanted, my dad's sister went to California and never did come back, and so he wanted to see her, and he caught a train and went to California and to see his sister, and he really had a good time. Yeah. Went by himself, and he'd never been on a train before, so it was quite an experience, but he learned a whole lot. I think he told us when he got home practically all of it, but I'm not sure he told us all.
Yeah. I'm sure. Anybody else got anything they want to ask Leon or a comment or anything?
Jeff, I married into Leon's family in 1966. I've been around him, I guess, as much as anybody here. And I've always found him a gentleman. And he's always treated me, and I don't mean this, but he's always treated me like a son.
Yeah.
And I just want to know it.
Yeah.
I really appreciate him.
And am I correct, he has a brick down on the wall because of Robert, right?
Yeah. Did you hear that? You have a brick on the wall here because of Robert. Robert got you a brick.
Now, where is the brick?
It's on the wall. It's lit up down
Is
here.
that where we looked at in there?
It's out here. Have
Oh,
you had him down
It's
there,
at the
Johnny?
courthouse.
It's at the
Oh,
courthouse.
okay, yeah. Well, okay, there's one in Brownsville too, that.
That is, yeah.
That's it.
That's what
That's
we're
the
talking
little
about.
ground.
If you go during the daytime,
I mean, Bowling Green there at the courthouse.
Yeah.
Okay.
your picture's up down there too inside next time you come to town in the daytime.
Is it pretty?
It's pretty. You're handsome. You got a great big long gun on your hip here, on your leg.
I'll tell you about Leon. Of course, growing up around the Cleveland area, he's had a lot of sales there. And of course, Dad and I used to go, and there was a Mr. Johnson down there that you was having to sell. Leon always liked to pick on me for some reason. And Roy Johnson, was that his name? You remember Roy? You know, he had that lung disease. And Roy was an outdoorsman, and they rode horses and had wagons and everything. And they had all these antique chairs. And I wanted some cane antique chairs, and the old time ones. So they had some, and I went down there. And Leon was selling. I walked up and had a big wagon. So he had this porta pot on this wagon, and he throwed it in there with these chairs. So I was bidding on the chairs, and he stopped and he said, "Jeff, this is not a cooler that you ice down Cokes in. I just want you to know that. If you're bidding on this as a cooler, I don't think you'll want it." So Leon used to pick on me a little bit at these sales. But we've made up tonight. You know, I've got charity for you in my heart tonight. We're gonna be straight freight
Now,
tonight.
from here on, I can do about what I want to.
Yeah. I just want to thank you for coming tonight and sharing your life stories and stuff with us. And it's been a great honor for me to hear it. And it's been a privilege, and I think everyone here has really enjoyed it. And I hope you many, many more years and success in your business. And I admire you for what you stand for. And again, thank you.
Well, let me say one more thing here. Now, when I come back, land was cheap. And when I started in the real estate business, you could buy, it wasn't called I was smart, I didn't know nothing else. My dad always said, buy a piece of land where you can get on your horse on Sunday and ride by and look at it. And he said, now the smart people back in the Depression went broke on stocks and so on, said, you always buy land. And I always kept that in my mind. And I bought some of the good Smith Grove land for $400 or $500 an acre at one time. I didn't have much money, couldn't buy much, but I bought all I could.
Yeah.
And then I've added to and added to, and Todd Webb raised, I had, when they had the tobacco buy out, I had 81,000 pound tobacco base, and Todd raised most of it, and they had the tobacco buy out, and of course they had to sell it and so on, but he was a good man, and he raised good tobacco, and I've always enjoyed the farms, and now I rent everything. I rent everything out, and it works all right. I got some good land rent sides, cheap land rent is cheap, but I don't see how that anybody. The Lord's been better to me than anybody, and I've been better to me than I've been to him. And I just I've got a good Christian, two good Christian boys that never give me no trouble, and And that's worth a lot. And of course, I wouldn't let them give me much, I'd get with it. But we all, there's not too many, there's a whole lot of daddies that can't work with their boys. And I never say, mind me, we will never have no trouble. Now, one day, this David says, well, he's talking about what they're paid. And David says, well, Dad, why don't you just pay us what we're worth? I said, boys, you can't make it on that. But anyhow, we have a good time and try to act like we're supposed to, and we appreciate the business that we have, and we've had lots of business this year, and we just love it all. And thanks everybody. I know they said the crowd was a little light here tonight, and that's fine. They could have called it off, been fine, but I know you got some other activities, but it's been an honor for me to be here and see everybody and tell some stories. I've got lots of stories that I could tell, but some of them I get in pretty deep. I can't always keep them crying, and that's not good, and there's a lot on my mind. And I've had a boy last night, some kind of a little something from Germany, and I had a little SWAT sticker there that